This is module 6. We are going to describe parts of speech tagging, which is normally known as POS tagging. So, in this module, we are going to describe in general the process of POS tagging on words to identify its exact parts of speech as well as its morphosyntactic function the word denotes in a piece of text. So, since the process of parts of speech identification in a sentence is a complex task, and that too if we want to carry out at the machine level automatically, it becomes far more complex because the machine needs to learn many things before it succeeds to identify the parts of speech of word in a piece of text quite accurately. We need to have large load of information to be tagged, to be implemented, to be programmed appropriately with the system. So, before the technicalities of assigning linguistic information with the system, training the system, it is better for us to understand what actually parts of speech means, what are the process of parts of speech tagging are available or we can think of, and how it can carry it out, what are the different levels or layers or processes involved into parts of speech tagging, and many such things. So, in this module, we will try to concentrate only on a few aspects of parts of speech tagging, like the challenges involved into it, differentiate between the morphological analysis and POS tagging, levels of POS tagging, stages of POS tagging, then some reference to the early works of POS tagging, tagging a text with a POS tag markers, marking metadata, marking paragraphs and segment boundaries, marking words in the text, and ultimately in the conclusion we try to concentrate on the importance of a POS tagged corpus. So, in sum, this is all in this material. Particularly in natural language processing, language technology, computational linguistics, and some major areas of language application, parts of speech tagging is identified as a process of grammatical information addition to the words. The primary goal of which is to disambiguate words at the grammatical level and assign them a particular lexical category or parts of speech. So, the basic task of parts of speech as addition or tagging involves process of marking of words either manually or automatically within a piece of text, which is called the corpus, as corresponding to particular parts of speech based on its form, its function, in the context of its occurrence, and its relationship with words immediately preceding and succeeding one, with is large within the larger syntactic frames like phrases, like sentences, or even paragraphs. So, here our task is to automatically identify a word in a piece of text, its function, form, and relations with others, then accordingly tag it. Since parts of speech tagging is an error-prone process, so it cannot be done immediately, quickly, without making any mistakes. We need huge amount of research into the texture of a corpus, identify the functionalities, actual identities of words, then we have to do that. So, this has been a challenging task for centuries, or not say for decades, among the scholars all across the globe to identify exactly the parts of speech of words and assign them. Since it can be done both manually or automatically, initially it was done manually, later on efforts have been made to develop different rules or methods or approaches to do the task automatically. Even then, the rate of success in parts of speech tagging is not quite encouraging. So, in this module, we are trying to keep these things into mind and try to proceed in a step-by-step manner to understand the whole problem. The basic thing here we need to find out what are the challenges involved. What we have noted that in a normal physical text, words when used in a piece of text can behave differently than its actual lexicographic identity. For example, if you take the word English word sound, it can be a noun, the sound of music, or it can be an adjective, say it's a very sound decision, or it can be a verb, he sounds innocent or he sounds pragmatic. So what it appears that this particular word at one sentence is behaving like a noun, in another sentence it is behaving like an adjective, in the third sentence it is behaving like a verb. So we say that it is noun, it is an adjective or a verb. But if I ask how you want to know how it is behaving like a noun, then it is very difficult to explore or to answer. So we need a large amount of linguistic knowledge to identify that in sentence 1 it is a noun, in sentence 2 it is an adjective, or sentence 3 is a verb. So even for a normal human being who is not much aware about those finer aspects of words involved in contextual frames, one can make mistake. We can all the time say that in all three places it is a noun. So how we as a human being can make discriminations among these three? So it is quite clear that we need a lot of knowledge of the language, functionalities of the language, aspects of the language, grammar information of the language, to understand in which different ways it is behaving. And also we require sufficient amount of information about parts of speech to assign or to identify a particular word belonging to a particular part of speech. If for human being it's a very tough challenge, think the complexities involved for a machine to define or to identify a word and to mark its appropriate parts of speech. So what we want to say is that identifications of parts of speech words is very difficult task, both in automatically or manually. Although it is believed that the parts of speech present in grammars or dictionaries and school text are enough for language to tag in the texts, in reality, however, we find that there are many more finer distinctions available among the words used in it. Now the question is how to proceed. There are two important issues. First thing is that in our traditional grammar books, in our existing school texts, instructions or textbooks, or even in dictionaries, you find there is a finite set of parts of speech which are available in the language, with an assumption that all the words which are used in a language can be assigned a parts of speech or other which has been included into the list. This has been taught for centuries to the learners. We have been taught in that way, and we have believed that the parts of speech which has been defined in our school textbooks are enough, are sufficient enough, or adequate enough to describe our language, to understand the language, to understand the functions of the words in the language. But this traditional concept is now at the verge of being challenged when we actually analyze the text stored in the corpus. We find that there are certain things which are not perhaps included in the traditional grammar frame, and if we go fine-tune those aspects of language which has been observed in the text, then perhaps the existing set of parts of speech available in my language need to be revised. So post-tagging scheme also opens up a debate whether our existing parts of speech set is to be followed or a revised one. In our earlier modules, we have strictly said that when the state in a language, if we find that existing set of parts of speech available is sufficient, can be appropriately used to define a text, fine. But at the same time, we also argue that if you think that that existing sufficient set of parts of speech is not adequate to take account the other things coming into the language, other properties available in the language, then perhaps we need to add up those new things. Here is an example. In actuality, we have noted when we analyze a corpus, there are many properties, such text categories like demonstratives comes into it, infinitives comes, gerunds comes, conjunctives, conjunctions comes, enclitics comes, quantifiers, particles, punctuations, all those properties also come into the text. But these are not assigned any specific parts of speech in the language. So we need to think about it. So here there is a great challenge. Also, we need to identify the more complex parts of speech tagging defined, so that we exactly identify exact appropriate pinpointed parts of speech of the words. So the point is, there are very complex issues are involved. Another important part in the whole process of parts of speech tagging, identification of a tag set to be assigned to the words. That means, if you want to have the fine-tuned information assigned to the words in the language, we need to have well-defined tag set. So tag set development is a long debatable issue. We know this has been discussed, also referred to in earlier sections, in earlier modules. There has been lots of debate what kind of tag set should be defined, whether it is an elaborate one or a short one, whether it is a generic one or a specific one. So as identifying the tag set to be applied on a corpus is another important task. Here I would like to go between the difference, the conceptual difference between morphological analysis and parts of speech tagging. What we have noted in many of the cases, in many of the situations, we have mixed up the two. We thought that morphological analysis is perhaps same with parts of speech. No, they are two different things. How they are different? The basic goal of a morphological analyzer is different from that of parts of speech tagger. Maybe there is some overlaps between the two with regard to information. The basic goal of a morphological analyzer is to identify the morphemes that are used in formation of the word. So, while we are applying a morphological analyzer, we are trying to identify what kinds of morphemes are combined together to form a word. While the basic goal of a POS tagger is to identify the grammatical identity or the parts of speech of the word used in a piece of text. So these are two different processes, two different goals, two different methods. They should not be combined together. So both are more or less based on morpheme related information of a word, and that information may come either from morphology and grammar or from both. This implies that in both the cases we need to refer to the morphological level of the word as well as the semantic level of the word. So we get morphological information from the morphological level of the word. Also, the syntactic frame has to be taken into consideration. What kind of parts of speech or morphological role or syntactic role the word performs. So information of morphological level is possible to extract from morphological structure of a word, analyzed individually in isolated context. It is very much possible that we can analyze a word in an isolated situation, dissect into parts, identify its morphemes, its functions. Also, we can find out what kind of combinations they are actually taking place, or how conjoining between the concatenation between the two elements to generate the final form. That is very much possible. On the other hand, Information of syntactic level is possible to extract from the grammatical function within the syntactic construction. So in that cases of POS tagging, syntactic information is available only from the syntax, only from the sentence where the word has occurred. So while the first function is carried out at the morphological analyzer, the second function is carried out in the cases of POS tagger. How do we find that morphological analyzer and POS tagger are two different things? Let me give you some examples from Bangla. For our Bangla, consider the Bangla word bodole, which is treated in two different manners, in two different schemes or system to elicit two different types of linguistic identity and information. Now, in cases of morphological analysis, what we'll do that we get two sets of information here. In the surface form is bodole, we can have two parts, bodal as a base form and suffix part a as a suffix. In that case, the parts of speech of this word is a non-finite verb, meaning replacement or changing. In the second set, information set, we said the surface form is bodole, is a composite unit, a non-breakable unit. So base form is bodole, suffix part is 0, and parts of speech is post position, and meaning in exchange of. I can give you two examples. Say, সময় কিন্তু এখন অনেক বদলে গেছে. In that case, বদলে is a non-finite verb. So you can get বদল plus a. But তুমি আজকের বদলে কাল এসো. Mean বদলে is basically a post position, which is an unbreakable unit. So these two layers of information, two sets of information are actually derived from the morphological analysis of the words. So this is the third thing it is done. But while we are talking about the parts of speech, we assign the first one as an instance of non-finite verb, and in the second case, it is an instance of postposition. So what happens? Experimental morphological analysis and POS tagging of words in a corpus database throw up many new issues and challenges, based on which the predetermined tag sets has to be revised, modified, or expanded. Also, we need elaborate guidelines for morphological analysis and POS tagging of words that are to be applied on this with our prior knowledge base to fine-tune the tag database basis or existing rules for POS tagging. While morphological analysis awards and POS tagged corpora may be utilized for training automatic morphological analyzer and POS tagger, prior experiments supply necessary knowledge base and linguistic insights that are indispensable for enhancing the robustness of a morphological analyzer as well as tagger. Information retrieved from prior experiments may also be used in language description, dictionary compilation, grammar book writing, or language teaching. So what we understand here, that morphological analyzer and parts of tagger are two different schemes to deal with the words, and they have two different functionalities, two different goals, and they are working in different ways. Now we want to emphasize on the levels of POS tagging. Normally, it is believed that POS tagging can be done at word level. We also agree with that. But assigning the POS tags to the words, which is known as tags, also depends on some other important information. So we want tag assignment or POS tag assignment, three different levels. We call it first at the lexical level. This allows to analyze the morphological structure of words represented in their surface forms. So the morphological structure of the word is one input, which is also required for POS tagging. Then orthographic level information is also required. This draws distinction among the homographic forms used in the same text or similar text to make distinction in their semantic roles. So we know that in the text we can have large number of homographic words which are structurally identical but different in meaning, different in function. So we also need to have large set of information, large amount of information from those orthographic level. Finally, we will need to have information from the syntactic level. This allows identification of syntactic or grammatical functions of words for assigning the POS tag entries accurately or correctly. So in a POS tagging cases, we are not only considering the words for our POS tagging purposes, we also need to emphasize the other units available in the text. So the POS tagging, parts of speech tagging scheme will not only work for single word units, also multi-word units, compounds, reduplicative forms, idiomatic expressions, all those words which are used in the text, they are also under the scheme of POS tagging. And for that, we need to have full detailed information from lexical level, from orthographic level, from syntax level to be clubbed together to identify the parts of speech. So in simple words, the process of POS tagging can work in a systematic manner in the following 8 steps. Those steps are something like that. First step is identification of words within a piece of text. First, the machine has to understand that a string of characters is a word. That means it has to have a very clear-cut mechanism to identify a single unbroken string of characters as a word unit. Maybe space immediately before that and space immediately after that can help a machine to identify word string. It also needs to take into consideration that sometimes the space in between the two parts of a word has to be ignored to consider the whole string as a single word unit. Second is identification of their orthographic forms and appearances. The machine, once it identifies the word, it has to identify the different orthographic forms and representations or appearance in the text. Third, analysis of their morphological structures and formation. Then machine needs to have large set of information embedded into the system, identify the morphological structure of the word, whether it is having suffixes or infixes or other formative elements combined together, or is a single base form. So a lot of information has to be acquired from the morphological database, morphological resource to understand the morphological structure of the word. Number 4, identification of the syntactic or grammatical functions in sentence. This is the most crucial part in the whole process of parts of speech tagging. That it has to identify in which parts of speech, what kind of syntactic role that word is actually playing in the text. Then determination of grammatical role and parts of speech. So once it identifies what kind of role it plays in the sentence, what kind of role, syntactic role it performs on the construction, it has to identify the appropriate parts of speech or the list of parts of speech tags as available to it in the system. Then identification also of its semantic role and in the sentence. So only not the grammatical role, it also need to identify what kind of semantic role it plays into the sentence. That kind of information is not always necessary, but in many cases that helps to understand exact parts of speech of the word. Then next stage is the assignment of POS tags either manually or mostly automatically. So once this semantic load, morphological load, syntactic role are already identified, it puts a particular tag assigned to that word. Once this tag assignment is done, it produces a tagged version of the text. A word is tagged. But whether this is rightly done or not, that can be checked manually verification and validation. So final stage is final verification and validation of the POS tag assignment. So these are the several stages involved into it. Then there are several levels, the steps are involved. Now there are several stages of tag assignment, POS tagging. First stage is pre-editing of a corpus. let the corpus be appropriately ready, prepared, without error, without entirely error-free text. So that it is called a pre-editing part, that a text is converted into machine-readable suitable format so that machine can carry out the task of POS tagging on the text. The second stage is actually called the tag assignment stage, which has involved several 8 steps just described. So here in this part, the actual operation starts. The machine with its inbuilt knowledge base tries to assign POS tag, parts of speech tag to each word. This can be done with a lot of knowledge base retrieved from other sources. Then third stage is post-editing of the target text data, that once the data is tagged, we make it open to match with the existing tagged versions. 2 ways normally applied to analyze those or post-editing the data. So we need to, this is basically a stage of error removal, stage of checking, stage of validation and verifications. So here what we can do is that first either we can have already pre-tagged text trial database on which this can be open to and checked whether the newly tagged database actually conforms to the existing tagged databases, or it can be made manually available to be checked manually and identified whether it is rightly done. Then we have already said at the beginning that we need a good POS tag set. That is a very requirement without which that is not possible to carry out POS tagging. So whenever we want to tag words in the texts, we need a well-defined POS tag set. For many advanced languages, this has been done long ago, but for Indian languages, it was not done. So if I can go back, that maybe in 2004, 2005, there was perhaps some attempt was made, first attempt perhaps in Indian languages, where POS tag was defined, and a simple POS tags for 15 parts of speech was identified in this POS tag set, and this included major parts of speech of the language along with some rudimentary information. So this was not a non-hierarchical, one-layered, single-layered POS tag set, and some samples are produced particularly in Bangla with reference to those tag sets. So those POS tag sets are not going to be, I kindly request you to refer to the table number 1 where I have given the full set of tag sets which would then use that. So following these tag sets, some data were tagged manually to be used as a training database for machine. Then once this POS tag set was defined, gradually this has been refined or remodified and augmented. Now we have got the BIS tag set database, which contains, if I am not mistaken, around 46 or 47 unique tag sets to be assigned to these words. Now, once the process of tagging starts, the first stage is marking the metadata in a text, as I have already discussed in details in extratextual and intratextual annotation of text. I am not going to give in digital full form, but you can refer to the table number 2 in the header file what kind of things are already assigned in the metadata part. Next part comes marking paragraphs and sentence boundaries in a text. That is another important area which cannot be ignored. And before the POS tag actual task start, we need to identify the sentence boundaries, also the segment boundaries or paragraph boundaries. If you refer to the figure 2, we have given some examples how sentence boundaries and paragraph boundaries are marked in the text. Then you can find out each sentence is having a unique ID and having a separate linguistic identity. Then third part actually starts with marking words in text with applications of either it can be done automatically or manually. So if you refer to the figure number 4, I have given a full details how words in a text are actually marked with different parts of speech markers. Then what happens? The whole process can be summed up in that way. Then we can get the output of a tagged corpus. First one, you can refer, if you refer to the figure number 5, it shows how a digital raw corpus, first we need to define the principles and rules of annotation, then normalization of the text corpus. The two important phases that has to be taken into consideration before the work starts. Then the POS tag set has to be designed, then execution of the task of the POS tagging on the database, then we can get a POS tag generated, then this generated validated corpus can be used in all different kinds of activities. To sum up, that there are many languages in Europe, in US and many other advanced countries where they have a POS tagged versions of texts available for research and development activities. As for Indian languages, not much work is done for POS tagging. So sometimes some POS data, particularly in the project of the ILCI, Indian Languages Corpora Initiative, in phase 1 and phase 2, we have got some amount of nearly say 50,000 sentences for nearly from two different disciplines from around 12 or 13 languages, where the sentences are tagged at the parsers level, mostly done in a semi-supervised manner, mostly manually, and checked and corrected. So this data, if you refer to, you can find out how the texts are actually tagged and how various tag sets are defined and how the text words within the sentences are assigned to a specific parsers which tag, taking into consideration its actual syntactic role in the sentences. So these are perhaps the only resources in Indian languages where we can have a tagged versions of the text. So in parts of speech tagging module, we have tried to understand the problems, the challenges involved into it, difference between morphological processing and POS tagging, and how a POS tag corpus can be generated. Thank you.